Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2025 is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. This is your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me this morning is Sean Kling. Sean isn't here to pitch get-rich-quick schemes or preach viral success. He's a Gen X business strategist who believes that in a world obsessed with trends, consistency is still king. As the author of Outwork Them All, a Gen X guide to business and leadership, Sean makes the case that the values his generation grew up with, discipline, loyalty, real-world relationships, and a mastery over motivation mindset, are more relevant today than ever in today's fast-paced, tech-saturated business world. Drawing from decades of experience and hard-won insights, Sean guides entrepreneurs and leaders through the core principles that actually drive success. In-person networks, assembling an inner circle of trusted advisors, and leading teams with clarity and culture. His book also offers a 9-step blueprint for rebuilding when business hits the wall, plus practical strategies for running lean and efficient without depending on overpriced software or fleeting hacks. Sean's mantra: the work works if you work it. If your audience is ready to trade empty motivation for proven momentum and hear straight talk from a guy who's walked the walk, I am truly pleased that he is here with me this morning. It's always great to welcome a fellow veteran. Good morning, Sean. How are you today?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Amazing.
Great. Glad to hear it. And please call me John in case you're wondering. I don't use doctor unless I'm at a restaurant trying to get a good table. That's normally my modus operandi, as I like to say. Let me ask you this question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? And what were some of the influences in your early life?
So I grew up in a small town outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. It was very rural. The school I went to only had less than 1,000 students in the high school. I graduated with 314 kids, I think. I think we only had maybe 2 black kids in the whole school. A typical Gen X life. I grew up, both my parents worked. My father was a Marine, had served in Vietnam, and him and my uncle ran a construction company for a number of years until my uncle's passing. My mom was a nurse and also a stay-at-home mom when we were really young, and became a nurse later when I got into junior high. Led that atypical life. I played pee-wee football. My brother was a wrestler. Didn't really get in any legal trouble. I would say my biggest influences were my grandparents. My grandfather had served in the Second World War, and I grew up on stories of him in the Marine Corps in World War II, and my father in Vietnam. So that had a big influence on me. One of the biggest things they taught me was a sense of community, giving back. My mom was a nurse, so she took care of the elderly. She worked in geriatrics. My father and uncle and my grandparents built the pee-wee football organization in our small town so kids could get off the street and play football instead of, getting in trouble, getting into drugs and stuff. So I would say that those were probably my biggest influences growing up.
My dad served in World War II in the Navy, and I joined the Navy when I was just out of college, and just prior to getting out of college. And I've always wanted to be a naval officer. Between my dad and my uncle Gus, who was also in the Navy in the Korean War, they have very, very heavy influences on me and influenced my choice of going into the Navy myself. So let me ask you a question. You're a strong advocate for Gen X values, consistency, loyalty, relationship building. What do you think younger entrepreneurs are missing when they overlook these old school fundamentals?
That's a tough question, and you got to kind of take it per individuals instead of like grouping the entire age group. But I would say that a lot of them are missing that human interaction. That's the biggest thing. They bury themselves in a tablet, in a phone, in their computer. They play video games. They are always scrolling some sort of social media, TikTok or Snapchat or whatever. And they're missing that human interaction. People can put whatever they want on social media and make it look like their life is a certain way. So I would say that's the biggest thing that they're missing from previous generations is that human touch, the human interaction, and the personal story.
Very interesting. When I was doing a lot of training some years ago, I found that to be absolutely the same. In fact, the people I was training, some older folks in the Gen X boomer crowd, had great concerns about this. The ability to communicate one-to-one, eyeball to eyeball, was something they were starting to discover. As you say, it's not something you apply to everyone. There's a trend where people were saying they're losing this ability to just look at someone and talk. Everything was, can I send you an email? Or those kinds of things. So I get what you're saying. It's very interesting. And I'm very curious to see as the generations progress down to Gen Z now, the question, of course, is, and I think you're talking mostly about Gen Z. Are you talking about Gen Z per se?
Yeah, mostly Gen Z, maybe a little Gen Alpha, the younger kids. My niece is 8 years old, so she's not a Gen Z, and she's constantly buried in her tablet. The progression of it is getting worse with new generations.
And you know what I think about a lot too is these minivans that have the ability to play a DVD. The kids in the back are being entertained with television and not conversing with their parents if they're going on a family trip. I've always thought that was an interesting dynamic to create. What happened to the conversations? Right. What happened to the games that parents would play going on vacations, driving for several hours? It's almost like we're relegating the children to watching these videos as opposed to engaging in conversation. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
And they're missing out so much on life. Reading a person is a business skill that is dying. One of the things that my father told me was you can tell a lot by the way a person holds themselves, their mannerisms, and the way they decorate their home or office. If your head's buried in a phone or a tablet, you're missing these things. And you can read a person on how they are, especially if you're in business, read their interactions. And the sad thing is with the burying their head in the phone on the long family drive or the TV, driving to Florida from New York, let's say, or something, you're missing that interaction where you're actually seeing the world, and your days go faster watching somebody do a hokey pokey dance than to actually look out to the scenery out the window and get to interact and shake hands with people, look them in the eye, read their body language, and read the surroundings.
So very interesting. I haven't had a guest on, I think it's been a long while, where we haven't touched on this. And yet it's so important, that human connection. Everything I read is so sorely missed by people. People want to connect with other people. And now, of course, laid on to this is the use of AI avatars, where anybody can clone their voice, clone their image, and present that to the world as though it's really them. But it's not. Yet, you constantly read where the human connection is so very important still. And I believe it will remain that way. I always like to say, no matter what the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. Wow, I hadn't thought about this in a while. It is not a subject I reflected on lately, but I will do more of that. It's just so very important. Go ahead.
Human interaction is important because if you look at just normal life, the birth rates are down. People are not dating anymore. They say that the average Gen Z is not as sexually active as prior generations. They're expecting this flawless person, but what did they say in the movie Good Will Hunting? This woman isn't perfect and neither are you, but the question is, are you perfect together? They're missing all this stuff when they're buried in their phone and not interacting. So it's not just in business, it's in life. Get out there. You've had it happen in the past. I've had it happen in the past. Get your heart broken, make some mistakes. That's how you grow and learn as an individual. You can't be shielded by YouTube or TikTok from the things that life is actually meant to be about.
I'm trying to remember the author's name, Margaret Wheatley. Margaret Wheatley is a leadership author, and she wrote a book called Leadership and the New Science many years ago. It must be at least 30 years ago. There's one line in it that I remember so vividly. We only know ourselves in relation to other people. I thought that really encapsulated so much of why you need to be in relationships or continue to make contact with people from a business perspective or a romantic relationship, for example. Because without it, you don't know who you are. They're holding up a mirror for you. You get a chance to see what the reflection is. And sometimes you're going to like it and sometimes you're not. But that doesn't mean you have to stay that way. You can work on it if you feel the need or the drive. Anyway, let's talk about your book, Outwork Them All. Tell me about the purpose of the book and give me 2 or 3 things in that book, in your book, that you think are the most important lessons a person can learn.
The purpose of the book is to enlighten people that there is a generation out there, it's a very small generation called Gen X, that transcends the 20th century and the 21st century. We're very reminiscent of the people that span the 19th century into the 20th century. Our generations are very similar, historically speaking. A period of large growth, the Industrial Revolution, political upheaval, things of that nature that happened in that generation are very similar to the Gen X perspective on life. We started our working career with people that are no longer alive. World War II veterans were in the working force when I was a young man right out of high school or before I went in the service. And we are going to be working with people that are not yet born. There's people being born right now that I will probably be working with in 18 years. And it's very possible. So we're that little merge group that can take the history of the 20th century, what made businesses very successful as far as personality building and rapport, and then also what happened in the 21st century. So that's kind of what the book is about. This one generation, you can kind of mirror them. The generation that was known as slackers, now all of a sudden are leaders. You have a lot of world leaders that are Gen X. So look at Ron DeSantis in Florida. And I can go down a list. Elon Musk is Gen X. A couple things you could take away from the book, and I don't want to delve too much into it, but the couple things is get to know your people, build your team. Nobody is successful by themselves. I don't care if it's in life, business, or pleasure. If you're in a team sport, nobody is successful by themselves. So build yourself a good team, whether that is subcontractors you work with, whether that's an employee, whether that's a business partner, whether it's a wife, whether it's a husband. And the other thing that people could take away from the book is to take time to get to know your clients. My father had a very successful company with my uncle, and my father always told me, pay attention to your surroundings, get to know your clients, because people are more apt to buy from a friend. Nobody likes to be sold, but people will buy from a friend. If you ask people about their wife, their kids, the Phillies game last week, or some movie, you become friends. You invite them to picnics, have dinners with them, and then you're opening a Pandora's box of potential leads because you're treating them like a human being. Most people like to hear their name said. So if you say somebody's name multiple times, that's a winner too. And all that stuff's kind of in the book, the things that Gen X learned before the mass implementation of computers and artificial intelligence.
It's funny, you talk about names. I make it a habit. I've done it for years. The shopping person's got a name tag on. I always call them by their name. And you could see just a little of a glint that they're recognized. That person is a recognized person in my shopping world just for the moment. But I always try to use their names, and I can't tell you how great that is. It's great because if you ask a question about, a product or, hey, what aisle is this on? And they're more than happy to help. They'll take you over there to the aisle and show you where this particular item is, for example. So that's a very small example, but I agree with you 100%. Personal relationships, word of mouth marketing. There is nothing better than word of mouth marketing. Do you trust this person? Yeah. Did they provide a good service for you? Oh, yeah, they're great. I want to use that person. I don't want to go over here and use someone I don't know. The more and more technology, the more and more personal relationships are going to matter.
Yep.
I'd love to get your reflection on that.
Yeah, 100%. I'll give you a story that ties into this. When I meet a new client, I research who they are and try to find out what they're kind of interested in. And one of the neat hacks that I did was I went down to Payless Shoes and bought a bunch of the cheapest, ugliest shoes that you could find. I mean, these were the ugliest shoes, but they were cheap. And what I did was I took a pair of the shoes, took one of the shoes out of the box and left one in, wrapped it up and mailed it to the person I wanted to talk to. And when they opened it up, they saw there's one shoe in here. Somebody sent me one shoe, but in it was a note. It said, now that I got one foot in the door, how could I set up an appointment with you to talk later? Now, that is a difference between doing some hokey pokey video online. This person's actually getting a weird shoe, and they're going to remember that. They're not going to remember a video, but they're going to remember somebody sent them a weird shoe. My wife makes crafts and beautiful decor for the holidays. Each one of my clients or prospective clients usually gets one of those baskets every year, and I get more texts and calls. Hey, man, that's a great basket. We're going to put this in our office. My wife is looking for a centerpiece. Thank you. It opens the door up. Utilizing that type of sales pitch, that type of growth hack, and that type of attention-getting thing, you can find that there is sales and business development, but there's also ways to present yourself as an individual outside of just using television or the internet or podcasts and things of that nature.
Right. I agree. You make it personal. You're the person that makes it personal. And it makes perfect sense. Difficult sometimes if it's a new client, a new person, you haven't met them, but that's a really good hook to engage them and drive their curiosity, which is a very powerful thing. Their imagination, as Einstein said, is the single most powerful force on earth. It's very interesting. Let's move on a little bit if we can. Let me ask you this. You've created a 9-step protocol for rebuilding a business when things fall apart. Can you walk us through one or two of the most critical steps that leaders tend to overlook during recovery?
So the first things first on the 9-step protocol is you need to get over yourself. Everybody fails, okay? When you're sitting there pointing the finger, this is somebody else's fault. This is, okay, maybe they contributed to it, but what got you to that point? So the first thing is get over yourself. You made a mistake, or you trusted somebody, or you didn't trust somebody, or you spent money on the wrong thing, or you didn't do the proper research. Most business owners will make those mistakes at some point. It doesn't matter if you are the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company or a guy who owns a small pizzeria downtown. You're going to make a mistake, okay? So the first things first is get over yourself and learn to lick your wounds and learn from the situation. That's probably the biggest thing. Then talk about how to regrow yourself, get your strength back into, who you are, get your attention back into the business, utilize what you've learned to make a new strategy, surround yourself with people that get you where you want to get. So that's basically the 9 steps, and it goes into depth each step on how to correct when you make a failure. I've made lots of failures. I've hired people that have sued me. I've been brought on my clients that didn't pay me. I mean, this is nothing new to a business owner. You're not a successful business owner if you haven't been stiffed at least once and you haven't been sued at least once. It's just the way it is. But, I took a lot of these things that I've learned through my failures and my father and uncle's failures too. Bull. You can learn a lot from them and applied them to the book to add ways that a business owner can maybe learn from our mistakes, but still don't be afraid to make mistakes when you're a business owner.
I would rephrase this, get over yourself, to, I would add a piece to that. And the piece is, you got to own it. You got to own it. There are a lot of people who won't own it. I've had several conversations with people on my podcast talking about the victim mindset. This whole idea that, well, you did this to me. And the answer to that is, well, if you have no control and you're always in the victim mindset, then you don't own anything. And if you don't own it, you can't change it. You can't do anything about it. So again, I absolutely agree. Get over yourself and own it. Now you have a starting point. You can say, hey, this is my problem. I've had many guests, we've talked about the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to say to your people, to your wife or whomever, yeah, I messed this up. I really screwed this up. But I know how I'm going to fix it. I'm going to go fix it. And that's the next piece in my mind. I own it. Now I'm going to do something about it. The worst person you can lie to is yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
If you're lying to yourself, you're going to go anywhere. You're just going to be stuck in the same vortex of doubt, self-doubt, and an inability to actually take any action. Let me reflect back on your idea, which I really like. The work works if you work it. Where did that come from? And what does that really mean? What were you trying to express or project when you came up with that idea?
I'd say the biggest influence when I came up with that idea was my father. My father had a 9th grade education, and the only education he had outside of high school was his short 3 years in the Marine Corps. He and my uncle in the early 80s formed a business, and by the mid-90s, were doing $20 million a year in sales. The work works if you work it shows that it's not always about education. It's not always about that big fancy college degree or who you know. If you're working and you apply to it and you keep applying to it and you don't give up, eventually you will get somewhere. Success is measured on what you measure success. Some people, there's a lot of fake gurus online that will tell you can get rich, or they have a podcast and they got this big following and talk about how they make $300 million a year. You're not in a league with those people, and they're trying to sell you something. Real work, working to get where you want, is the goal and what makes you happy. Some people's money might be, I want to make $1 million. Other people might be, I want to be able to retire when I'm 50. Other people might say, hey, I want to own a boat and go out on the weekends. So your level of what you put into things and where you want to go is strictly you. Do not buy the fake guru stuff. There's lots of it out there. And you got to stop comparing yourself to these multimillionaires that are out there. You're not going to be them, because a lot of them are doing this for fun now because they made their money in their other career. So that's basically what that is, call it.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, you got to be where you are. You've got to do what's in front of you. And applying yourself. What I try to do in my work is I want companies and people to come together in a way that people derive a great sense of meaning from the things that they do. They're not just there putting in time and getting a paycheck. Those days are gone. I mean, COVID convinced us this was a bad idea, just going for a paycheck. People want to be aligned with the values of the organization and vice versa. The organization wants to be aligned with the individual, and people want to be involved in the decision-making processes of the organization. They want to matter. Everybody wants to matter, and they want their work to matter. They want to have impact. So I absolutely agree. I think you have to look at where you are, where you want to go, and what you want the work experience to be like for you. And then you have to seek it out. I believe we are now at a place in history, because of AI, because of the rapid complex change, we are entering into, or have entered already, into an era of unbelievable entrepreneurialism, that people no longer have to rely on large companies to make a living, to feed their families, put food on the table, or whatever they choose to do. There is so much opportunity now for people to start a business with a laptop and move on with that. That requires application. You want to make it? Here come the hours. Here comes the dedication. Show us what your offer is. And hopefully the offer that you make makes sense in the marketplace. I'd love to get any reflections you have on those ideas.
I think you're right. I think we're in an age where making your own way in the world is going to be a lot easier than it has been in previous generations because of technology. I don't want you to lose yourself in technology, but it definitely makes things a lot easier because you have things like accounting software, you have things like, emails, you have social media, you have artificial intelligence, you have all sorts of tools to utilize. But even though it's easier to get self-employed, you now need to be a little bit more creative and make yourself a niche, because everybody's going to want to do what's easy, and that lowers the rate. I'll use an example. Like you can be a virtual assistant, but you're never going to be compatible with the pay that they make in the Philippines or India versus the United States. You're going to have less opportunity. Not going to say you're not going to have any opportunity, but you have less opportunity because people are going to want to go for cheaper. But if you make yourself a virtual assistant that specializes in X, Y, and Z in the United States, well, now that's different, and that's where you can make your money. So I totally agree. It is the wild, wild west of self-employment right now. You're at the dawn of that.
I absolutely agree. And I think there are a lot of companies out there that are going to be shocked at this. I think they're starting to realize it, but I think they're looking around saying, these folks don't have to work for us anymore. So what do we do? Well, maybe what we do is we hire them to do the job that we would hire them to do inside the organization, but now they'll be an outside gig worker or a consultant. It's a new world that's emerging from a cloud base. That's going to sound too techy, but almost like a smoke screen, if you will. That's what the image I'm looking to create. It's a smoke screen, and now we're starting to see the smoke dissipate and the new world emerging through it, where, as you say, we're at that place where the entrepreneurial perspective is going to take over. And yet it goes back to your saying, you got to work it now. Okay. You just can't be idle. What's your niche? For example, if you're a virtual assistant, maybe just in healthcare, you're connecting people in healthcare because you know that area, or maybe in manufacturing or concrete, where you have specialized knowledge and you can help people connect for podcasts or positions. A small scale headhunting, perhaps, is very interesting. And I think it's, again, opportunity and chaos at the same time.
Yes.
Opportunity and chaos at the same time. They're reflections of each other. So we'll see where that takes us. Well, we're getting close to the end, and I'd like to ask you the last question, and that is, what is your hope for the future? Where do you see Sean going? And what do you hope things will work for you or with you in the future?
I have so many dreams and passions, but if I'm going to say one thing I'd like to see happen in the future, I want my daughters to succeed, beat their dad. A father is somebody that wants their kids to do better than they did. He's the only man that ever wants another man to do better than him. I want my daughters to succeed. I want them to live the life that I've lived, but better. For as far as me goes, I'm looking forward to continuing with my media company and growing that. I host 2 podcasts now and looking to do a little bit more. I'm a big history geek, so we'll be putting out some history stuff coming up in the future, and maybe even looking to write a second book. That might be something in the future as I wander down life's road and take what life throws at me.
Tell me the name of your podcast. I'd like to put that on.
So I have 2 podcasts. One is called the Kling Connection Travel Podcast, where we talk with all sorts of interesting people from around the world. I've interviewed people that climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro, swam the Great Barrier Reef, swam across the English Channel, and all sorts of stuff. Been to Iceland and Antarctica. And our second podcast is called The Kerfuffle. And that's a podcast that basically talks to interesting people that have interesting life stories. They're not always business people. They could be scientists. They could be military leaders. They could be historians. They could be teachers, whatever. And we tell the story of these people's very unique and interesting life and get the insight into just a way to look at things a little bit different than we're always trained.
Right. Well, they sound great, and I wish you great success with it. This has been a really great conversation. It's been a reminder for me. Something you don't think about all the time. The best place to hide something's in plain view. This notion of the ability to communicate one-to-one, to create those personal connections, still matter. And they matter probably more today than ever before. I'll tell you an interesting closer. I had an MCC master coach on my podcast by the name of Ed Temple. Ed Temple's in Canada. Ed Temple created an AI coach named Enzo. So it's an AI app where you can ask this AI coach, personal coach or business coach, questions, and it will come back and give you answers. He uses that. During our conversation, I said, "Hey, Ed, so what does this mean?" He said, "Here's the way I see it." He said, about 75 to 80% of the redundant things that we do will probably be handled by AI, which tells me that the remaining 20%, the human part of it, will become even more important. I absolutely agreed with that idea. AI may take some things right now, and some of the things that I'm putting out is, hey, slow down the hype. Slow down. Let's figure out what is real here. And let's not get carried away. Don't forget, the human connection is still the most important thing that you can do out there. So I truly appreciate it. Sean, this has been a wonderful podcast. I appreciate your time here today on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I wish you and your family all the greatest success in the future. Thank you so very much for your time. Thank you.
And thank you for having me.
Great to have you.